Welcome to WCWF, the Tuesday show, our WWE heavy show. Thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate your patronage and your dedication to this little program we're doing. My name is EJ the Collector. I'm here every Tuesday and a lot of Thursdays talking wrestling on the Family Podcast Network. Wrestling Chat with Friends. Find us everywhere, Facebook, YouTube. We got groups out there. Join us. We're, of course, on Twitter at WCWF Pod. Joining me tonight, as he always does on Tuesday, he's the B. Brian Blair to my Jumping Jim. He's the Shawn Michaels to my Marty Jannetty. He's the Axe to my Smash. He's the Greg Valentine to my Brutus Beefcake. The undrafted free agent of all undrafted free agents. TG, great to see you. Give me something good. What you got?
Oh, wow. What a broad mandate for me to open the show. Give me something good. I appreciate the fact that you tagged me as the HBK
For sure.
of the group. That was much appreciated.
I think anyone who might know either one of us would definitely say that you're the Shawn Michaels.
I don't know about that. I think there's many different ways to evaluate different things. I mean, you have a wonderful family, for example.
I'm sure at some point Marty Jannetty did before he completely abandoned them.
So is that a preview? Would you have an announcement you'd like to make here?
I would never make announcements like Marty Jannetty
does. Here's one thing I thought of over the weekend. I did not get a chance to watch it, but I am going to prioritize watching the Brett Austin rivalries documentary on A&E.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is not only one of the best single matches that I've ever seen, and my personal number one all-time WrestleMania match, but also I think a pivotal, like a turning point, I think, in the history of professional wrestling, the way that was handled, the development of both characters and kind of the trajectories that those characters were on during and after that feud, I think is really interesting. So
how long after that match did Brett leave the company?
Well, that was WrestleMania 13, which would have been in April or late March of 1997. And then Survivor Series was November. So it would have been roughly 5 or 6 months, give or take.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. Well, guys, we're going to have some topics I want to talk about tonight. If you're on Facebook or on Twitter, leave a comment, ask a question, give us your opinion on what we're talking about. There's a couple of topics tonight we're going to cover. We're going to talk about a special guest who was at Raw for a while yesterday before he was asked to leave. We're going to talk about a really big, one of the bigger news stories in WWE amongst lots of news stories, but something that actually is going to affect the on-TV product, an announcement made by Triple H yesterday. And we'll talk some other odds and ends. Before we get started, though, random topic to get started. Who is your favorite all-time celebrity to make an appearance in WWE?
Ooh. Okay, so this is a great question. Are we saying actual in-ring participation or just on the program in any capacity?
Any non-wrestling celebrity who has made an appearance on WWE as anything from getting in the action to we won't say not just being in the crowd and waving. That doesn't count.
Yeah. People, I think maybe, especially by the end, did not like the concept of the Raw guest host. I did not agree with that. I thought it was much like the 24/7 title, something that probably outlived its usefulness. But I thought as a concept, it was actually really interesting to have introduced someone into the mix who would not normally be there and would participate in a few things here and there. I think my all-time favorite was Bob Barker. And I think that segment with Chris Jericho has said, he's like, the only time that I ever almost broke character on TV was that like face-to-face with Bob Barker. He said, that's as close as I ever came.
It's a great choice, and everyone's entitled to their own choice. But in the entire history, that's your favorite, of Bob Barker being guest host. That's fine. It was a great segment.
I mean, again, this is where we're. So I would sort of put it into three categories: people who were actually performed in ring
Sure.
as wrestlers, participated in a match.
people who did other stuff that was actually related to the matches themselves, and then
timekeepers, announcers, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Interviewers, that sort of thing. And then separate from that, the other category, which is probably where Barker is. I think in ring, that would be something that I really have to think about, because there have been a few. I mean, like, how do you it would be Logan Paul, except now he's on the roster. So how do you still categorize him as?
No, you wouldn't categorize him.
I would say I always liked Bob Uecker, but I just liked Bob Uecker in general. So he would be. I think he would be in that second category. Would probably be Bob Uecker.
I certainly am not criticizing your pick of Bob Barker, because my choice is literally more ridiculous than that. My all-time favorite celebrity appearance in WWE, did it a handful of times infrequently, was Pete Rose. Charlie Hustle showing up, and he ended up having a gimmick so much that he actually got into the Hall of Fame. Whenever he'd come out, it was like 3 or 4 appearances, maybe 5 total. Everyone infamously, he was the chicken one time. He ended up getting tombstoned by Kane every time. That was the gimmick. It was great. He was my favorite baseball player for a while when I was younger. And I think having those random moments, he became my favorite. The other half of that question I wanted to ask was, your favorite, who do you think is the biggest celebrity who's ever made an appearance with WWE?
Well, I think it's always tough to evaluate that, because there's hindsight and there's in the moment. First one that comes to mind off the top of my head is Muhammad Ali at WrestleMania 1.
That, I believe that's the correct answer.
Yeah.
I believe that's probably the correct answer. I mean, there has been a former United States president who appeared, but he wasn't president at the time. He's probably the most well-known Celebrity Hall of Fame member in that wing. But Trump, because he was president, although it was before he was president. And
remember that sort of weird time frame in the 90s when WWE, then WWF, of course, would occasionally bring someone who was like a celebrity impersonator, but present them as if they were the celebrity.
They've done that a couple of times with Bill Clinton. They did Obama and Hillary one time.
It's just such a weird move.
Entertainment company. Sometimes you throw everything against the wall, and Ali is bigger than Trump. 100% agree. Yes, largest. Can't dismiss the fact that Trump was an actual president, but yes, Muhammad Ali, the most noteworthy name, I would say. And he was just a guest announcer or guest timekeeper. Same WrestleMania that I think Liberace appeared on. Was that like 1? I think it was 1 or 2. Yeah, 1 or 2.
Muhammad Ali, I think he had like one of those things where it's like, look, we can't trust this guy to actually be a referee because of all the stuff that pro wrestling referees actually do that most people don't even realize. But we'll stick him, much like Mike Tyson, we'll stick him outside the ring as like an enforcer.
Yeah.
And that is my recollection of what he did, because I remember he had a referee's outfit on because this was the era when they had their referees wore boxing style attire, as opposed to now they wear more like, striped.
Right. This is the red shirt, the bow tie. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Liberace was he was a timekeeper. And I remember he he had a custom, like, he didn't have the regular bell. It was like a little bell that he
amazing. Amazing. Let's get into some current topics. We mentioned these at the top of the show. The first thing we'll get on, this was the news that sort of broke the internet in the last couple of days. Raw yesterday was in Chicago, home of Phil Brooks, CM Punk. The news I heard was that, I guess on Monday, Punk was flying back to Chicago from doing some commentating for some sort of Ultimate Fighting, not UFC, but whatever gig he does. And there were some WWE employees on the flight with him. This came from Fightful. I'm going to presume with guys like Will Washington over there at Fightful, I'm going to believe most things that Will reports. But Fightful reported that what ended up happening was CM Punk was on the flying home. There was WWE guys flying to Chicago for Raw. They started talking. Don't know who was on the plane, but Phil got right. I intentionally did not mention SRS's name. He and I have some history. We'll get into that on another show. So CM Punk went to the arena at some point yesterday. The first video was on Twitter of him talking to Tamina Snuka, I guess in the parking lot. Some fans hollered out to him. He did not turn and acknowledge the fans. And apparently, the story went that some of the guys got him into the arena. So brought him in a door. He walked in early, and he was seen sort of in the common area, kind of stayed in the common area. The report said that he met up with The Miz, and specifically with The Miz. Apparently, the report was CM Punk and The Miz squashed some beef that they had with each other. Are you aware of any beef they might have had? Do you remember any past comments?
The only thing I know is that I know that they actually used to be, good like work friends, and then I don't remember the specific thing that happened, but I think basically it had to do with. I think the genesis of the falling out was that Miz was and is always a very loyal company man, and obviously there was a time when CM Punk was, not only at odds with WWE, but was literally involved in a lawsuit, against them. So I think that was the origin point. I don't know the specifics though of like how it happened.
I don't either, but it must have been somewhat noteworthy, their conversation, because it got reported that some beef was squashed. The other person who he apparently saw briefly, I think the report said he ended up seeing and running into, was Triple H. These two have famous history, depending on who you ask. They, hate each other, never liked each other, have had, according to Punk on that famous podcast, they had some words at times. There was just a lot of disdain. Punk thinks that Triple H never liked him. We don't have to rehash any of that. But they caught up and spoke, and Triple H said to Punk at some point, as reported, can you go to the big guy, call them the big guy, to ask if it was okay him being there? So Triple H, told CM Punk, hey, can you just check in with the big man Vince, make sure it's okay that you're here. So within about 20 minutes, as reported, security approached Punk and said he really couldn't be there any longer. CM Punk graciously agreed, left the building, and that was all reported. So Punk shows up on Raw to see some friends, it seems. We talked about it on our group chat earlier. We had some differing opinions about it. So,
yeah,
TG, the floor is yours. Was this a good idea, bad idea, and why?
I did, like, from the WWE standpoint, I don't think it matters one way or the other. I think that the issue is the very specific situation that CM Punk is currently in vis-a-vis AEW, which is they are doing everything they can to try to bring him back into the fold. Mm-hmm. And there apparently are some, to the extent that there can be irreconcilable differences in wrestling, there seem to be some irreconcilable differences between the EVPs and CM Punk, to the extent that they are actually going to do a soft brand split reportedly, and basically Punk's roster is going to be the Saturday Night Show Collision, and then Dynamite will kind of remain the province of the EVPs. So my point was, the reason why I thought this was at best sort of a tone deaf move by Punk is, like, if you already know going in that there is this very thin ice, and assuming Punk does want to try to reconcile and work again there, I think you got to be a little more strategic about this and anticipate that it could create issues with people on the AEW side if you are seen or reported, like, even that though you used to work there, which at this point it's a long time ago now. I mean, it's many years ago he used to work there. If you were seen or perceived as sort of, doing this in the midst of them really kind of bending over backwards to make sure that all parties will be happy on the AEW side, I felt like it was just
maybe not the smartest thing to do at this particular time. And I won't even say like it's not smart is not the right word. If the goal is because CM Punk is obviously a smart guy. If the goal is to get to a point where we can have AEW Collision, and that's going to be a show centered around Punk, and he will be a main event player immediately and brought back into AEW. This to me, I think, is counterproductive. And the point that you made in the group chat, and of course, I'll feel free to elaborate on this or add or whatever, was that like, but somebody like Adam Cole is he'll appear on WWE like YouTube stuff, and my counterpoint to that was, again, this is a unique circumstance. So something like Ricky Starks being backstage at the Royal Rumble, it's like kind of interesting for wrestling fans. You're like, ooh, a little cross pollination there, but nobody was like that. To me, is like that's a guy who's in the business who has friends in the other company, blah blah blah. This, because of the timing of it and who is involved, fair or unfair, was probably not the best move for Punk from the standpoint of getting back into the flow of things in AEW.
Okay. I did have a sort of a different opinion about it. Now I'm getting kind of jaded about this whole situation. At times I have vacillated between who my ire has been more directed at. I've generally been a little bit more favorable of Punk, because I really dig CM Punk, always have. I haven't always been the biggest Young Bucks fan.
Yeah.
There is some bias there. A lot of it just sort of has always had to do with how they presented themselves and how, from what I know about wrestling, being, you're all compatriots, you're all comrades in this. So, and there's just been so many allegations of the Bucks just sort of looking after their own, so, and I don't like that sort of what I think is bullying behavior. And our take on Brawl Out, was just different. Everyone was wrong in that situation. So here's what it is. I don't know how it sounds like Punk wants to come back to AEW. What no one knows is what overtures have been made yet to your Chris Jerichos, to your Kenny Omegas, to your Young Bucks. I could go off on like why are we even bringing Chris Jericho into this? Just because he's mouthed off about not wanting to work with Punk. He's called CM Punk a cancer. Punk called him a stooge. Jericho, as far as I know, yes, you were around the beginning, but you're not an EVP. You're a locker room leader. I would grant you that. But like, aren't you just talent? And your opinion, your opinion's important to AEW. I recognize that. But when these kind of decisions are being made, it's up to Tony. If Tony was okay with this, now, like I said in the group chat, I hope what Punk should have done is let your employer know, because of the nature of the situation. Hey, I ran into Rey Mysterio on the flight coming to Chicago. He wanted me to stop by. I'm gonna do that, whether he asked permission or not. Tony is probably savvy enough to not try to make that a big deal, because in the big situation, it's not a big deal. Punk values mental health, I'm sure, and if seeing his friends who he hadn't seen in a while because it's in Chicago, if that's good for his mental health, wrestling related or not, current contracts or not, if you want to see your friends, see your friends. We should always see our buddies. Here we go. Let me just finish this point, Mark.
Interjection.
Yeah, so if you want to see your friends, fine. The only person who needs the care really is Tony Khan. It's up to Tony to clear it up with the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega, and it shouldn't even be really their problem if he stopped and visited his friends. If he's on his way back, it sounds like they're not going to be together anyway. Cheats, split the difference. What do you got?
Guys, I can't believe. Like, I had no intention of coming in on this segment.
Good. Glad you're here.
None.
I was fine. I didn't care. No one should care except Tony Khan.
But I do have to crash this in a couple of points.
Go for it.
One is that I think Tony Khan would care. Like, I don't think this whole Tony Khan, in my mind, has done all to me since taking over from day one to prove that he wants to be a mini Vince McMahon more than anyone else in the world. Is he Vince McMahon? No, but he's definitely Vince McMahon light at this point. And I would think, one, Punk has also showed no he may be a very smart man per se, but he has shown no, I think TG used the right word, awareness of the moment or situation, in which I don't think Punk would have even asked Tony Khan about any of this.
I'd fault him if he did. I'd fault him if he didn't do that.
I don't think he did. Well, there's nothing in my mind that would say CM Punk would ask Tony Khan this one way or the other. I do think Tony Khan would care, and I do think Vince made the right decision, if it was Vince, to say, get the heck out of here. And I do think that he should have been way more aware. I think the phrase you guys are looking for is, it was tone deaf. His decision to show
I said
up,
tone deaf earlier.
I disagree. I think these feelings are a problem with wrestling fans.
In Chicago, because here's the thing. I think it makes it worse that it was in Chicago. I think that it makes it a heightened situation. Even though it's like Chicago's his hometown, of course he's going to be there. Chicago is like CM Punk world. And I think him showing up in Chicago even makes it a bigger emphasis or a bigger deal than it would have been if it's like, oh, they just happened to be backstage in Richmond, Virginia or something, and Punk was traveling through. So
it's where Punk lives. I mean, it's where he was.
I think if indeed we are on the road to Punk's return in AEW, we are on the road to 2 separate shows with Punk being a headlining act in one of them, I think he just has to be a little bit more aware of what he's doing and how it's going to be perceived for all people that care. Because the other thing about this is, the only people that care about this are people like us and people that are trolling Twitter and looking for information. The general public isn't going to know or care that CM Punk is outside or backstage. So this is just fodder for the Fightfuls of the world and people that can make a big deal out of this. But I thought it was ridiculous. I think it was woefully toned down.
Yeah, and so this would be the concern I would have if I were involved in this situation.
Yeah, what are the ramifications? What are the possible ramifications?
The possible ramifications are these. If, like, let's say even he did like text Tony Khan and say like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to stop by backstage, whatever. So my concern would be like, you already have dudes who have positions of power on screen and off in AEW who are really predisposed at this point to not want to work with you.
That's their problem.
That's
their problem.
It's a company problem.
Exactly.
It's Tony's problem. It's Tony's problem.
Right.
It's not their problem to go complain to Tony about it or to go to Dave Meltzer and give their opinions about it. And just, to be fair, they haven't. I'm just saying, anyone who's got a problem with that because it's Punk and who has their personal issues with Punk, get over it.
No way. No, totally disagree, because Punk has done specific things that have led. I'm not saying he's 100%, at fault, but he has done specific things that have led to these problems that haven't been resolved yet. And while these problems are still not resolved, so okay.
He's not posting on his Instagram outside the United Center. He's not antagonizing. He's not antagonizing anybody. He's trying to stay low key.
You know what I would say though?
Low key is you watch the show at home. That's low key.
Exactly. You know what I would say about the same thing, and it's different circumstances and very much less controversial. I would have a problem if Roman Reigns showed up backstage to visit his friends at AEW Dynamite. I wouldn't like that either. If I'm WWE and the biggest star in my company goes to the other event, even if it was to support whoever, I will tell you this, and this one's less important because it's usually overseas, but I don't love Bayley flying all over the country to hang out with Sasha Banks.
Why?
Because I just feel like it's a little bit of a, let's keep these things. If you're the biggest stars in my company, we know that all of it's wrestling entertainment, but I would say I don't want to see him showing up anywhere where it draws eyes and attention to somewhere else.
So I get what you're saying, Mark. My thing though is that Punk, this is a unique situation with him. I get what you're saying about Bailey, but I also think that like Bailey going to those shows to watch Sasha is much less of I can see how it could be a potential issue, but it's much, much, much less of an issue
Here's the thing.
Compared to like the Punk situation is
Punk thing's a whole
an
different
ongoing
thing.
circumstance
but
that hasn't been resolved.
I've read, and we heard some things during WrestleMania weekend, that WWE was chapped about Trinity Fatu hanging around Jade Cargill all weekend. Like, and that was Cargill at like, other events in Vegas that time.
That AEW was chafed or WWE was chafed?
WWE was chafed because Trinity Fatu we don't exactly know where she is in regards to returning to the company.
She's been released.
Right, but I think between her husband and other people in the company, they're trying to figure out a way to reintroduce her. And she spent I'm just telling you what I read. I'm not a dirt sheet expert. But she palled around with Jade Cargill, taking pictures, doing videos all weekend, and they were just like, well, we're going to delay this even longer.
Let me ask you this, Mark.
So many of these guys meet at these WrestleCades and WrestleComs and hang out and get pictures together. Where was the outrage when MJF and Liv Morgan were photographed at a party together? There was none. This is
right. And just like I said before, same thing, like Ricky Starks backstage talking to Cody at the Royal Rumble. It's like, to me, I get what Mark is saying, but to me, I would not be that concerned.
It's a bigger name and makes, like I said, the fans up. But like to your point, I don't think this doesn't have to be a big deal because again, this is like it's still one. Basically, it's two different companies, but there's no NBA players who are getting in trouble for going to their friends' games. When their season's over. I mean,
they don't wear the LeBron has to cover up the Adidas logo if he plays in the Drew League.
Yeah, so this was the question I was going to ask you, Mark, is based on like what you were saying about as an example the Bailey situation or something like that. Do you like or dislike the trend in modern sports, contemporary pro sports, of guys on different teams who seem to be much more friendly, I guess?
Yeah, friendly, yeah. You know what? I don't dislike it per se, but I like it more when somebody says, "F that guy, I want to try to beat him," because that's the different.
Yeah,
that's the competitive balance. That like the whole KD and all the rivals, Steph Curry and all them being best friends. I do think that's cool because it does help them when they have to like unify for causes and stuff of that nature per se, draw attention to a water crisis or something like that. But there's a ton of folks, not as many as there used to be, but there are folks that are like, I don't want to pal around with these guys. Dame Lillard's a great example of somebody that's just like, he's social and positive and friendly, but if you really ask him, does he want to like pair up on a super team? He's like, no, right. I want to get my team and I want to win. And I think you just start to have a different level of respect for that level of competitiveness. I do think that's different though than wrestling.
Yeah.
And I do think that if we like it or not, whether it's a real competition or not, I think AEW and WWE are in direct competition. And I would feel a certain type of way if I was Vince McMahon and Roman Reigns was like, hey, I'm really good friends with, Wardlow. I want to go see him wrestle. So there's a reason why you don't see these things.
Yeah, and for the thing that I would just want to reiterate is from my standpoint, whatever broad rule in general that we might all agree with or disagree with as far as like, should wrestlers from one of the big companies fraternize or go backstage with like, to me, it's like wherever you fall on that spectrum, from my standpoint, fine. But the Punk situation is still like a distinct, a very like they're gonna re-debut him in Chicago in a matter of weeks. Like that's the plan when Collision starts. And I'm like, everything that we have heard, to the extent that wrestling journalism can be trusted, is that they are still at a point where, the EVPs are not satisfied with the situation. Punk is not satisfied with the situation. They certainly have not reconciled. Right. But what I'm saying is at a certain point, so this is the bottom line. If I'm Tony Khan at a certain, I by the way, if I were running AEW, I already would have been at this point months ago. At a certain point, it's like, this guy has more trouble than he's worth. He's well into his 40s. So he's going to bump the audience from 850,000 to 912,000.
Tony would rather have that. Tony would rather have that and 42,000 people at Wembley than not have that and have 33.
I think they'll draw at Wembley no matter what. I mean,
I don't think Punk at this point is a difference getter. I think he's a bonus if he comes, but I don't think he's a different getter.
I agree. I think even by the end of his last run, I don't think that he was like moving the needle as much as you probably would have thought a year earlier. I'm not saying he was a negative. He certainly was one of their top guys and certainly one of the guys who can hold viewers, but I don't think it wasn't like, the difference between I don't think he moves the needle as much as like Roman Reigns in relative terms, like when he's on the show versus when he's taking a week off.
That's why we've gone back and forth on this. That's something like that is why I really don't think that WWE and AEW are in real competition with each other because
they're not. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. They're not. I think I think we're just missing a lot of just the human element of it. This wouldn't even been a big deal maybe if that video hadn't been released, but it would have gotten out anyway. But I think anyone who's really up in arms about these guys just trying to, live lives as well. Let's never forget that they're living lives. No one's damaging someone's business reputation. If you're getting angry at that and you're in the AEW locker room, I think you're being a little bit of a mark about yourself because he's not doing anything other than, seeing friends, and he's not antagonizing anybody. And I think if you just get that upset, you're looking for a problem when one just isn't there. So that's
my point. That's my point. It is if this guy already has 2 strikes against him,
I don't know
he's got to absolutely. He's a bad employee.
With who?
He was a bad employee in WWE, and he's a bad employee in AEW. That press conference was the most unprofessional crap I have ever. Not the most, but it was very unprofessional. He's a bad employee.
Here's the thing, and like I think we're all intelligent people, but we're not running a wrestling company. The guy that ran a wrestling company to the tune of like $9 billion said, "Hey, I think Punk should leave now," and I think that's proof enough to me that says he shouldn't be there now.
And the crazy thing about that, and look, we all know that Vince he's got his own issues. But the crazy thing about that is, of all the people who have ever come through WWE, Punk is the one guy where he's like, I will never work with that dude again. And this includes people who are like criminals and and he's just we can make it work.
I'm not even saying a moral judgment. The fact that Vince was like, and I think TK, believe it or not, I think TK would have been smart enough to be like, dude, don't go. It's not a good idea. Yeah. And the fact that Vince was aware enough of the situation that's all happening to be like, hey, we don't need him here. This doesn't bring us any good. I think him being there didn't bring any good to either company. And now we're just talking about it.
And my thing is like, okay, let him live his life, fine. But I don't.
Maybe it made him feel good. Maybe it made the people he saw feel good. I'm sure it made the Miz feel good if he squashed anything.
Okay, so it's he, but it was selfish.
Why are you laughing at that?
It was definitely selfish.
I have no clue how these people feel, and we're like mental health. We have no idea if this has even a touch of mental health involvement whatsoever. None.
Seeing your friends.
Sometimes maybe you shouldn't just do what feels good all the time when there are other implications to like your job. And
I just don't think we have any clue.
If CM Punk's not getting the Collision job because he went backstage on Monday afternoon to see Tamina in the parking lot, then I might be done with both these companies.
If they already have, here's my point, we can move on from this, but if they already have said like, we've got to create a soft brand split just to have this guy work for us, he should be in contrite or at least like maximum awareness mode from now until when he debuts.
Maybe the Bucks and Hangman should be in contrite mode for a while. Ooh, hot take.
Okay. I mean,
here's the thing: if you watch All Access, it seems like the Bucks are now. Maybe it's just because it's TV and they're already back, but they seemed like they regretted the whole thing and was really upset about not being able to be there with their friends and work. Like that's what I saw in All Access. Now and again, that's a scripted show that
clearly,
wants to have us have a very good opinion of the EVPs and the Bucks.
Maybe they regret. Yeah, maybe they regret their behavior.
They showed all the things that they had to show on TV to be like, this was, we had a big part to do with this screw up, and we're just like happy to be back.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
you didn't get that from All Access?
No, I got that. I'm one episode behind on All Access, but yes, it's during those moments where I lay back and say, what's the agenda of what they're trying to put on the screen here? That is because it is for the storyline. It made me think that everyone who was completely dumping on Punk and 100% blaming him, some people present company included, and put the EVPs as going to regulate. Maybe that was short-sighted opinion. Maybe the Bucks did have quite a bit to do with this situation.
They should not have gotten into a physical altercation with him, and I think that they were punished, and that was appropriate. But I also watched that press conference, and there is a big difference between someone like MJF who's saying very provocative, angry things at a press conference, and it's clear that it is character building and all that. And CM Punk who's like ranting about, again, like the example I go to is like, he didn't have to talk about Cole Commander. He did not have to talk about that, like, at all. And the fact that he didn't have the discipline to be like, maybe this is a bad idea, or I'm gonna channel this into something that is really sort of storyline based, same emotion, use it. But that to me is just,
it's hard to get over 1 million views on a Saturday night. Does Collision get over 1 million in its debut if Punk's going to be there?
That's a great question. You're right. Saturday night will be tough. Yeah, it's going to get a big number.
I'm going to say no.
960,000 comes up just short, maybe.
It's a good. I'll tell you this. It's a good. Well, I don't know.
I'll tell you.
Is it going to debut after the NBA Finals are done?
June. Probably not.
Mark, when did the NBA Finals wrap up?
I don't know.
It's going to fall right in there.
I'll tell you why I don't think it's going to do. I think it'll fit in that 950, 940 range. And you know why? I think it's because we've already had this before. That's why. And I think when we had it before in Chicago, and the first time he walked out in 9 years or whatever, it was fresher, it was newer, it was a much bigger deal. I think him coming back this time, whether he comes out in Chicago or a new show, unless they pack that stuff with pay-per-view type matches that we all want to watch and big names and maybe another big return, it's not. CM Punk alone is not going to do it again for the second time. He's just. We've already seen it. We've already been there. We've already read the book.
He's remember that. You get that? I would say he hasn't done it. I think he did it. He has all their records for pay-per-views and viewership. So I mean, CM Punk's the ratings king for AEW.
Wasn't a lot of those records a combination outside of the one? What was it? Rampage that he debuted? Was it a Rampage he debuted?
Yeah.
Yeah. Outside of that, wasn't all the other stuff was like a combination of him and Danielson?
Well, I mean, mostly just and I'm talking about the pay-per-views also. He has all the pay-per-view gates and all the pay-per-view buy records.
Right, but was Danielson on all of those too, right?
No, one was there was a MJF the collar match, and that was they all. I mean, it wasn't just him. His return probably has the highest.
His single return to Rampage was a huge deal. It was like a must-watch TV deal.
Right.
But the interesting thing about his whole time period run was there was a Punk return. I can't remember what went first, but there was an Adam Cole, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, like triumvirate came in that had the world talking about AEW with these guys. But Bryan Danielson was a huge, huge get. And for diehard wrestling fans or people that were really in the know of the indies and all that, they were like, Adam Cole's huge as well. Like, it was a time period where AEW was doing a whole lot of things right, hitting on a lot of cylinders, but they had runs of debuting kind of ex WWE star, ex WWE star, and then they got Danielson and Punk and Cole, and it was just so it's I now looking back in retrospect, and I like Punk. I don't dislike Punk, but there's a lot that happened in that time period that was, I think, a combination of factors, and Punk was a big part of that, but so was guys like Bryan Danielson writing the Players Tribune piece about his first match outside of WWE. It's like, I just think there's a lot of factors that came in. And like I said, I don't think that this Punk return will be as big as the first.
Now, having said all of what we've said, I will add that I think that a brand split or soft brand split for AEW is going to be if they do it right, tremendously beneficial for their programming. Because one of the things that we talk about all the time is it's like, oh, like this guy, like he shows up and it's like, oh, that's right. I haven't seen him in a couple of months. Like what happened to him? And I think that this having two semi-separate rosters, I think will help with that and allow some people who aren't on TV every week to have a chance to sort of,
Okay, so what do we learn from this? That Malachi Black gets thrown out of the building if he tries to go visit with Selena on a show.
No,
okay.
completely different. His significant other, and he doesn't have a beef with the company. So it's totally, that's just what I'm saying. It's
the marriage one I do think is different.
Yeah,
gotcha. Andrade has been he's married to Charlotte. I guess.
He was at the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And here's the thing.
Contracted AEW employee who's had heat with AEW.
Yeah, but
and
Punk
talent
is a
there.
different. If Buddy Murphy was in the
Punk's a special situation, right?
That's what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying.
If Buddy Murphy was in the back visiting Rhea Ripley, I don't think it would be the same thing as Ricky Starks when he visited Dustin. However, I do think if Roman Reigns was in the back of an AEW Rampage visiting whoever, I think it's a big deal. I think it's a bigger deal, and I don't think the company heads would like it.
Okay. You get hang around for topic 2, Mark? Or
no.
You're out of here.
I was just so excited about this because it really is a good topic, EJ. It really is a good one.
I think I say a lot of that just because, and I said this in the group chat, they've got a huge summer ahead of them. Yeah. Another Forbidden Door. We're going to hit all in. Just like another summers are always big.
Yeah, that Wembley show's a big deal.
Yeah, so I need everyone focused. I need everyone to sort of check their egos if they have to. Everybody check their egos. Like Punk, go along to get along a little bit. Tone it down some.
What about Ethan Page? What happens to him if he checks his ego?
I'm very concerned about Ethan Page. He checks his ego. Well, he's the only person who probably can't afford to check his ego. I need everybody to get healthy. Danhausen's got to get healthy because Danhausen's got to be there. I'm glad Adam Cole seems to be getting better. I need Keith Lee to get some Just for Men. These guys need to be
I don't know what's going on with him.
All right. Well, we'll save all that for Thursday. Let's get back to WWE talk.
It's the WWE show. Everybody.
Topic number 2. When was the last time a new title got debuted? The Universal title, I guess, right?
I was going to say the women's tag.
Oh, the women's tag. There's probably the 24/7 in some way. Anyway, this was big news. Yeah, yesterday on Raw, Triple H said that that at the Night of Champions, which is taking place in Saudi Arabia next month, they're crowning. He called it the World Heavyweight Championship?
Yeah,
the WWE World Heavyweight Championship.
I think he just said World Heavyweight Champion.
Okay. There's going to be a new world title. They're not going to get rid of the brand split. WWE is sticking with it. They're doing a draft next week. The rosters are going to shift. Roman Reigns is the current undisputed Universal Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah, WWE Heavyweight.
The Universal Championship was its own thing to be the other world title for the other program.
Yeah.
And he beat Brock Lesnar, who was the WWE champion.
Correct. Yep, WrestleMania.
Okay, so one could say, well, now there's 3 quasi-world championships because now is it still the undisputed? Is it going back to be the Universal? They're still somehow giving Roman 2 titles. They're creating what seems like a third. Tom, explain it to me. Explain to me just a second. What'd you think of the title? That's always the big reveal, is what the title looks like.
I get it. I conceptually, I understand it, and I agree in principle with it. I think the actual execution of the design is it's going to take some getting used to, because basically they wanted something that was evocative of Big Gold, but they also want, like, hey, the problem with Big Gold is very subtle WWE branding. We are not subtle. We, especially now that we're kind of merged, with UFC, we need to be clear. This is WWE. So it looks a little bit like a Frankenbelt, where they took like this design and then slapped to the big WWE side plates and main plate logo on it. But I think I'll get used to it. I mean, having that title, especially the way Triple H kind of explained it, I think makes a lot of sense. And in much the same way that I think a soft brand split will be helpful for AEW, I absolutely believe that the creation of this title will be beneficial to WWE. But you raise some very, very good questions, which at this point are completely unclear, which is to say, does Roman still have two distinct championships, or are they quietly, which I think would make sense if they quietly sort of like, this is one title now. This is the Roman's title, and then there's this other title. There's two brands, two titles. That's it. And then if so, like, is it, presumably it would be, in terms of continuity, it would moving forward be the continuation of the WWE Championship and the Universal title, just like when they unified the Big Gold and the WWE Championship previously into one title. It was Big Gold that sort of went away, and the WWE title continued on. I think that would, because of the longer lineage of the WWE title as opposed to the Universal Championship, which obviously was just kind of created out of whole cloth a few years ago, as you said, I think that they would preserve that as the primary lineage. One thing that I was thinking about that made me laugh out loud was, of course they're not going to do this, but it would be funny if Roman showed up in Saudi Arabia and won that title too, and they just kept creating like these new belts for someone else to win, and he just kept winning all of them.
There were so many memes, even within a few minutes, of memes of Thanos putting the ring in, and that was Roman Reigns, just collecting all these. Okay, so here, I like the design of the title overall.
Yeah.
You're right. It gives me feelings of the Big Gold belt, which I think were intentional. Behind that, slightly too big W in the middle. You knew it was going to be big. It is kind of right there. It does give me some also feelings of the old NWA Dome globe. There is a globe. Behind that.
Yep.
So if you told me, like, give me something that invokes, I don't think they're trying to bring back or raise any NWA or WCW feelings at all with this, but just from a simple design look that maybe hardcore and even casual fans might recognize somewhere in the recesses of their mind, the Big Gold, obviously, and maybe it's a nod to just the history. The dome's a little bit behind it. I think that W is a little too big, but I don't expect it to be smaller. Like you said, they're not going to put it smaller. I also don't, and you said this in the group chat, where you said that the IC title, you actually favored that look more. I am not really a fan of belts that have angles and edges.
Oh, okay.
I do like sort of a round look. Some subtle curvatures are fine. Some of the things I use as an example is like the new design of the IWGP title, I don't like, or the New Japan title. The one that Jay White most recently, the one that's currently being used.
Oh, okay.
It's got some point triangles at the top. Remember that terrible Jeff Hardy title in TNA?
Yes, that was awful.
Yeah, that was awful for the colors and everything like that. Even the IC title, which is not the worst in the world, when it was reintroduced, the one they're using now that Gunther has, it's just a little too liney for me. I like something a little more round. Titles and just boxing and everything else have traditionally been, I've got no angles here. It's not a circle by any means, but there's no weird lines coming off here. So I kind of looks like this. And that title has a nice large round shape. I like them. I like them big. So that will take me less to get used to than some others,
No angles here could also be the tagline for Rampage. I think,
great.
One thing about that belt, the new one, that I think is a good thing is the fact that if you look at philosophically, I guess, where they had gone with their recent belt designs is that they were like, we want consistency of like brand consistency, which again, I understand the theory behind that. So for example, when they create the Universal title, it's exactly the same as the WWE title, except it had a red strap. And, the Raw Women's Championship and the SmackDown Women's Championship are identical, except one has a blue strap and one has a red strap. Same with the tag titles and so on. And the ones that don't fall into that kind of category are, and this is, I think, what I liked about the IC title is that they're very straightforward designs that aren't particularly flashy, I guess, which I think is, appropriate, especially considering who's holding the title now. The one exception to that was the US title when they redesigned that. And a lot of people don't like that. I actually think it looks pretty cool.
I'm not a huge fan of it, although I've warmed up to it more recently.
Yeah. But what I was going to say about the current design they just unveiled is I like the fact that all of the recent world titles they've had, men's and women's singles titles, have been like templates, like have had the same basic design by design. And now they've done something really to be like, let's create something that really is distinct. And I think that's a good thing. That's smart.
Okay, so just if you're putting your prediction hat on, I think it would make sense. Probably, good. You actually have a prediction hat. Excellent.
Yeah, all right. Literal prediction hat.
Does Roman stay on SmackDown?
But I can only predict golf. So.
Does Roman stay on SmackDown? Does that be still? Is this title for Raw? It was debuted on Raw. It feels like it's probably going to be a Raw title, indicating that Roman is going to stay on SmackDown. By that regard, then SmackDown's going to have the first pick overall, because why wouldn't you pick Roman Reigns first overall?
Right. I think so. The way it's going to work is, and I'd forgotten this, but this is how it was last time, maybe the time before that, is being a sports guy. One of the issues I always had with not all, but some of the prior drafts was like, this draft order doesn't make any sense, because obviously you would always take like the men's and women's world champions theoretically would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, unless you had somebody else like a Brock Lesnar or somebody who wasn't the world champion at the time, but was like a big star. And a lot of times it wouldn't work like that. So what they did last time, what they're doing this time is they're going to have like only half the roster is going to be draftable on SmackDown, and only half the roster is going to be draftable on Raw. So hypothetically, Roman may not be the number one pick this Friday, because they might say like he's on the reserve for the group that's going to be eligible on Monday. But to your point, if whenever he's eligible, it would be completely non-canonical for anyone other than Roman Reigns to be the number one. Like, it would make no sense whatsoever. And I think with Triple H being the primary creative guy, I think he's going to be like, obviously Roman's going to be the number one pick. So to answer your question, I'm not sure where he winds up. And I'll tell you why. Historically, WWE was more enamored with their relationship with Fox than they were the relationship with, NBC Universal, whatever, the USA Network. But remember, we are about to enter contract renegotiation time for these rights. And it is not at all certain which show will be, or which network or whatever will be the A show or a network once we get through the summer.
Right.
So that's what's really interesting to me about this, is because I think that they are going to strategically place Roman wherever they think the potentially most valuable real estate is in TV, that may or may not pan out. And then you factor in like, oh, and now they've merged with, UFC, and they're under this new corporate umbrella. Like, how does that factor in? I'll just say this. If the status quo is maintained, meaning you've got to deal with USA Network and you've got to you just get an extension for more money with both, then you keep him on Fox. I think he stays on Friday, but
yeah, some of this to all your point, like it certainly seems like they're angling to keep Roman the title holder 1,000 days. I mean, now it's almost like a certainty.
Yeah,
they're instead of what was talked about for a long time is like how they're going to split these titles. Is it going to, is he going to have to give one up? Is Sammy going to win one? Is Cody going to win one? Remember when that was fun to speculate about that? They now have to come up with a third because they've, they've painted themselves into this situation. But I think they're totally fine with that situation because it has paid off because fan interest is as high as it's been in a long time. And they've had this really amazing run with Roman. You think back, remember we could have had a conversation we could have had if we were doing this show 7 years ago, was how much we hated having Roman shoved down our throats. We don't want to cheer for him. You want to make him the biggest star in your company. And there's a section of fans who they booed every win when he was the biggest. He was going against the biggest heel, whoever that was at the time. They were making you care about him. They got in the end, they got everybody because now people salivate over Roman. He is celebrated. It's a model that worked, I guess, with everyone they've ever wanted to do that to. And people, were a lot more polarizing about, Roman. The leukemia, not the leukemia angle, obviously. His leukemia situation gave him some sympathy and some fans that he might otherwise not have had. It made the situation, I guess, easier. And that was even after there was this cramming down the throat feeling about Roman. I mean, yeah, he had.
Go
ahead.
I was going to say what I'll never forget is, and you might know the specific years off the top of your head. I do not. But there were back-to-back years in the Royal Rumble where the first of those 2 years, he was like he might have been the runner-up or certainly one of the final group. Mm-hmm. And like people were like, please, we want Roman to win. The Shield had been big. He was a young and up-and-coming guy, and they wanted him to win, and he didn't win. And then the following year, that had been a year where, to your point, he had been kind of already started to be shoved down people's throats. And when he won at the end, people were
furious.
That was the one where The Rock even came out to like raise his hand, like, hey guys, like you like me, you should like him too. And fans were having none of it. And I just remember at the time thinking, what I'll say now too, which is part and parcel to the wrestling business, whether you're talking AEW, WWE, or another company that has a TV show, where there are going to be wrestlers who the company sees as either a face or a heel, and the fans do not see them as a face. Like that's always going to happen. Sometimes it's because you're behind the curve creatively, and sometimes it's because the company that you don't know what their long-term plans are. And a lot of times, hopefully, they do know what the long-term plans are, and they're like, we know why people are not into this now, but 3 months from now, you will be into this. And with Roman, it took the longest time for it to finally click. But man, when it did, boy, oh boy. I mean, there's like, to me, I mean, this, again, I'm definitely a WWE fan first and foremost, so I'm a little biased towards that product. But to my mind, he is, not only is he the biggest star in the world right now, but it's not like there's nobody else in his category, and he's by himself.
Yeah.
And there are other great wrestlers, no question, and there are other big stars, but he is just on a tier that is at the moment solely occupied by him.
Seth and Cody are at probably somewhere, they're at 2 and 2A, and it's not even close.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, and maybe do you want to get into predictions about who's going to win this title?
We can. You can give me
early predictions because it's a ways to go.
Sure.
I think it's the most likely to me is Seth. because I think that he's a guy who really he is perpetually a world champion caliber performer.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the way WWE has been booked, and I don't disagree with the way it's been booked, with not only Roman's dominance, but then also you had Brock in the mix for a while before Roman unified the titles, and then you had Cody coming in a year plus ago and sort of taking up all that oxygen. He has sort of been lost in the shuffle, and even though he has, other than the fact that he lost to Cody 3 times in a row, he consistently is feuding with guys in the upper tier, coming out on top in those feuds, but he's not getting. And he pointed this out on Monday night. He's like, since Roman's been champion, he hasn't beaten me. And I think that speaks to the challenges created by the way that they book Roman, which is a net positive, but still you've got a downside. And I think it makes the most sense for him to win it. I don't like the fact that this is happening in Saudi Arabia. As we've talked about, those Saudi Arabia shows are supposed to be this pocket universe, sort of weird stuff, and guys who maybe haven't wrestled in a while. And like the fact that they're using it to be this, crowning the first champion for this new world title, I think is, it's not ideal. I'll just put it that way. But as you correctly pointed out, like, you pay that money, like that's what you get.
That's what needs to get. That greatest Royal Rumble ever just wasn't good enough. No, you gotta give something better this time. I'm sure could another check.
Yeah.
Why don't you create something new for us? And
the greatest Royal Rumble is a perfect example of how that, like, in theory should work. It's like there's gonna be this crazy one-off thing that like has its own belt and trophy, and then we're just never even going to talk about it again. And like that I'm cool with. It's the stuff where it's like, no, this is like going to be a major storyline point for who knows how long after. And so
if it's not going to be Seth, going over Solo Sikoa, or just for argument's sake, maybe even let's say Drew McIntyre, if he gets back into the fold, he's dealing with a little injury right now. There's also some contract negotiation issues, but I always want to see Drew up there too, because I'm a big Drew fan. If you're not going to have Seth go over and be that first champion and ride that wave with the fans and the song, because he's huge right now, let Cody kind of still pursue Roman, his sort of white whale thing. We talked about this a little bit, like, since KO and Sammy are not planning on being in Saudi Arabia and they are facing the Usos this Friday, we might get a title change Friday. I'm kind of doubting it, but you never know. If they end up dropping those titles before Saudi Arabia, I would love to see I think it was Jimmy's prediction yesterday that Kevin is just using Sammy. He said using Sammy to get the tag title. Really? You're using your best friend to get the friggin' tag straps? But if that comes to fruition and the Usos win and Kevin once again turns on Sammy, I'd love to see Kevin win it and Kevin and Sammy do this dance one more time and have Sammy Sammy get his world title from Kevin in that regard. That'd be a lane that they could pursue.
Interesting.
Through that would get you through SummerSlam. That could take care of both of them through the summer, and the Usos can get the titles back, continue their problem with Roman, and however that's going to resolve itself. We still have probably another year of that to enjoy with the slow crumbling of the man. Too many people thought that with the Usos and then Cody that the bloodline was over. I was kind of one of them for a while there. I think we're going to have this bloodline, just this unit of themselves. It's not even going to take outside forces. Solo, Jay, Jimmy, Roman, it's all going to fracture well into next year, it seems like, with Roman holding this title. So, I'd be okay with that too. Having Kevin and Sammy, I think the appetite for Kevin and Sammy, like, we've seen them go back and forth almost as much as we saw Randy Orton and John Cena go back and forth, but it's sort of this renewed spark of them coming together, getting tag team champions. I could see it happening again. Otherwise, you can have Seth having it and just have your run of Austin Theories and Bronson Reeds. Meanwhile, the U.S. title might end up on SmackDown. You're going to have Gunther maybe over on Raw. That's sometimes always happens. So it looks exciting. Let's go another week before we really give a lot of predictions for. Is the draft starting this Friday?
Starts Friday. This
All
is
right.
it.
Who's the number? Well, we got to do some prediction. Who's the number one overall pick? How do you think it's going to shake out?
I mean, if it's not Roman, it makes no sense. That'll make me mad if it's not, because it's like at least follow the canon of your own show. Like, it has to be Roman.
So
How could it
there'll
not
be a SmackDown and a Raw choice on SmackDown this Friday. At least if they'll both be picking.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, the way it's going to work is that well, actually, I don't know if they're going to do the thing, because remember they used to do like Raw gets 3 picks because they're a 3-hour show, which I'm like, does that really make sense?
I tried to follow the Alpha Academy. What's his name? Otis and Chad. I tried to follow Chad Gable explain it to Boogs last night, and I kind of got lost too. So tag teams might stay together, might not stay together. Right. The Alpha Academy is done for. You totally know that's happening. Okay, so Roman SmackDown gets the first pick. Roman gets picked.
I think so. I mean, whoever's number 1 pick has to take Roman, or I will be mad from a story integrity.
So if it goes back to Raw with the next pick, you're either going to pick Cody, but you don't do that because you want to keep him together with Roman, or you're going to pick Seth. So to start it off, Roman and Seth are going to stay on the same shows, indicating that those are the 2 number ones on your program.
So one, we're not entirely certain yet about what the exact format is, but the second point to remember is you and I are talking about this as if it is
a real thing.
well, not even necessarily real from a standpoint of like real sports, but also like if we were 2 producers of these respective shows and actually got to pick our rosters, like who would we pick? That isn't really the way it's going to work.
Raw can pick Randy Orton first overall.
They also like to do this thing where, in much the same way that they use certain match types or whatever to really hype up like younger talent, they also like to do this thing where they will have somebody go in the draft a lot higher than they quote unquote should based on kayfabe performance. And that's the way for guys like, Kevin Patrick and the rest of the announced team to talk about, oh, this guy is a young up-and-comer, which, by the way, that's one thing I'll predict about the draft is I think you are going to see more NXT involvement than you have in a while.
Agreed.
And that is 2 reasons behind that. One, obviously Triple H is a much bigger believer in NXT, but also – you called it a few weeks ago. WWE has basically been in not putting on terrible shows, but certainly the shows have dropped a bit from pre-WrestleMania, and I think that's by design. I think they're in a holding pattern, and they are going to use the draft as sort of the vehicle through which they do all the big debuts or the surprising call-ups that they used to do on the Raw after Mania. And so I think you're going to see that. So I think you'll see more. We're going back to Tamina. I think you're going to see more of NXT presence in the draft, and then also I think you're going to see somebody, whether it's an NXT person or already main roster person, who gets picked way sooner than you would think as a way to boost.
Yeah, that could be anyone from, obvious choice would be Braun Breaker. Carmelo Hayes is the champ, so I think I don't see him going in the draft.
I don't think they're going to take a chance.
But guys like Joe Gacy is probably ready. Cameron Grimes from NXT is ready. You got Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade, Tiffany Stratton, and Nikita Lyons, lots of names who probably are ready. You don't want to deplete the NXT roster because you've got a whole show dedicated to that. But that's the whole idea of NXT is to get the young stars exposure, TV time exposure, get their own show. So what's the biggest thing you expect to see on Friday then?
I think the biggest thing that we'll see on Friday, I don't think there'll be any surprise at the top. If Roman Reigns is eligible Friday, he gets picked number 1. And that'll be a big part of the show. But I think what you're going to see is the biggest stuff that happens Friday is going to be one of 3 things. a big NXT call up like Braun Breaker or somebody like that will go early. 2, as you have pointed out, maybe the mid card belts switch.
Yeah.
The US and the Intercontinental. And 3, I think you will see some combination of draft pick. Like I think the Street Profits are done. And I think they're going to get split up in the draft. And so you're going to see some high profile tag team get split up, and that will start, a story based on that. I think the biggest question for me going to the draft is, so are they going to be able to keep the bloodline together, or does it even matter? Because if they keep the tag titles unified and the Usos win, the draft becomes irrelevant to the Usos. And so as long as, Solo gets drafted to the same show as Roman, that's all you need. And the bloodline at that point is all together.
Right.
So, by the way, just a word of caution.
Yeah.
You were talking about Drew McIntyre earlier. Just don't say his name 3 times, because that will much like Beetlejuice or Candyman, that will summon Mark Cheatham back onto the to the show to heavily criticize Drew McIntyre. So
my prediction is that Bray Wyatt will not be mentioned in this draft. I just think there's still whatever his medical issue is. If he's not ready to go, if he's still, I mean, there are other people who are injured. Like there's some guys who are ready to come back. It seems like Randy Orton is probably close. AJ Styles can't be that far away. He just had a
Styles will be he'll be
involved in that.
Yeah.
Folks like Bray Wyatt, folks like Big E, who's just just unknown, and there's really not ready for anything. Even someone who's like ready to go, but they just sort of haven't been on a lot because they got sort of nothing for you right now. Like they'll be mentioned in some sort of supplemental draft to sort of just fill out the rosters. If Bray's just still, there's no time, anyone who's got no timetable for return will just be passed over, and they'll have to just come up with something if and when. We'll have the draft. It's getting done over SmackDown Friday and concluding on Raw Monday.
Yeah, and the thing to keep in mind, I can't remember if we talked about this on air, so to speak, last time, or if we maybe chatted about it separately. But WWE is deliberately trying to piggyback off of the buzz or attention around the NFL draft.
Yeah.
And so they have now moved their draft to sort of coincide with the NFL draft, which is I think a really interesting strategy. But what that means is that's why they're doing like start it Friday and end it Monday rather than the reverse, because that puts it within the window that also is shared by the NFL draft. So one other thing just to bring up really quickly, what's going to be interesting, not just with the draft, but sort of overall with WWE over the next 2 months, basically, is that you have the draft this week and then into next week. Then you have, of course, Backlash, which I think will be, from a storyline standpoint, will probably be rather inconsequential. It's really just a big deal for Puerto Rico and to sort of establish more foothold in that market. But then you have the Saudi show, which will crown this new world champion, plus whatever else happens that night. And then immediately following that, the next PLE is Money in the Bank. So you now have like a new world title that's available to cash in on, plus rosters that are completely mixed up, presumably. And then you also introduce the element of Money in the Bank. So by the time we get to, the 4th of July, all of a sudden you've got all these new sort of interesting aspects that could play into storylines on both shows, et cetera. One question for you, and this is something I've been kind of puzzling over, is as the brand split, this most recent brand split has sort of gone on, the lines between the brands have gotten very blurry. And to the point where once they announced the draft, it was basically like all bets are off until the draft. Do you think with the draft that they will now consider this like a reboot and go back to, we're going to be pretty, not strict, but pretty consistent about, with the exception of maybe a couple of champions, keeping everybody on
the show that they're supposed to be on.
I would think so. I mean, I think at times, like you said, it's been more heavily managed, and enforced than in times past. I think there's probably, there's some high profile names that float back and forth, but yes, I do believe that this is intended to really distinct these two again, restack these rosters, line them up so both are strong in their own mind. We didn't really talk about this. Triple H said that, he started his speech off by saying, like, whatever Roman's the champion, whatever show gets Roman, that's the show that's going to have that universal title. Did
Right.
he then say this champion is going to be defending it everywhere, every place? I felt like maybe he misspoke, or maybe I misheard. I almost sounded like that this world heavyweight title is not necessarily going to be just as exclusive as Roman is to the other. He didn't make it sort of sound like that. Maybe he got caught up in how he described it, but he made something. I thought he said something about defended all over the world, everywhere.
The impression that I got, and I would have to go back and rewatch it to be 100% sure, but I did not get the impression that this would be a title that was defended on every show. Okay. I got the impression that it was very clearly,
it should be,
Roman will go to whatever show, and then what the other show, the other brand is going, this will be the championship of this brand. Good. He did say, he was very clear, and this was an interesting thing to say. And I'm really on the fence about whether it was undermining or not. I mean, I don't mean undermining like in a sneaky way, but like whether it was counterproductive to point this out on TV. Mm-hmm. He pointed out that, like, we need to have this other championship because we need to have a championship that can be defended regularly, which is absolutely correct. Yeah. The problem with saying that on TV is, yeah, exactly. It highlights the fact that, the biggest star we have isn't here a lot. Mm-hmm. And this was always my thing. Like, as you know, I'm Brock Lesnar, big fan of Brock. Back when he was like the dominant guy and he, won both titles, my whole thing was, I thought that was a bad move. And the reason was to have like a single champion, and he was the unified or undisputed champion or whatever it was he won from Cena, I guess. I was like, what they need to have is, it's great. It's totally, if you have two world champions, it's completely fine. Whatever you want to call those two titles, it's completely fine. In fact, is probably beneficial to have one title, maybe, that is a super high profile guy who has, maybe mainstream appeal. He doesn't defend it every month, which is okay. But you also need to have that other title where you do have like a guy who's going to main event most pay-per-views defending a single
someone who's going to be at house shows too.
Exactly. And you probably know this, but one of the original reasons why the Intercontinental title was created and how it was used, especially like during the 80s when Hogan was the big unbeatable champion, was so we had a championship that we could, like, when they were running two circuits, when we have like a show in Columbus, Ohio and a show in Cincinnati, Ohio, that we have a championship match on both shows.
Right.
And that's kind of, a more modernized concept of sort of what this potentially, would be or could be. But I did not get the impression. I just got the impression that whatever show Roman is not on, this is going to be the world championship for that show.
We'll get it one more time. We will definitely cover the draft next week. We'll also cover anything we need to cover with Backlash. It sounds like it's gonna be fun. That Cody Brock match is probably gonna be fun. Bad Bunny was out yesterday. Him and Damian Priest are gonna have a street fight in Puerto Rico. That'll be exciting. You can make the argument that Bad Bunny and Taylor Swift are the two biggest musicians today. High profile, two of the three probably, if you're going to count, maybe Kendrick Lamar or someone like that. But like Taylor Swift and Bad Bunny are right now in pop music as big as it gets. Do you think there is an alternate universe where Bad Bunny is selling out Allegiant Stadium and Taylor Swift is like starting a program with like Trish and Becky Lynch for the world title?
First of all, and I say this to my trainer all the time, he's a younger guy. He's like 24 or something. I'm like,
I was really knowledgeable, like music from like 1978 to like the late 90s. I'm like super locked in, very knowledgeable. There's a point where after like when I went to law school, from that point forward, I basically have been in a cultural coma when it comes to music. And I'm just like, I don't know who any of these people are.
Because you're 47 years old.
I'm not quite.
You're not 47 years old yet? Okay.
I'm a couple of years younger than. Remember,
you're my brother's age, right?
Yeah. So my point being is like, of course I've heard of Taylor Swift, but like if it weren't for WWE, I don't think I would have heard of Bad Bunny.
Right.
And I certainly didn't know until he did WWE stuff, and then I sort of learned a little bit about him. I was like, wow, this guy is, like you said, I mean,
huge.
He could be one. He's probably one of the top 3 musical artists in terms of popularity and stuff in the world.
100%.
You know, it's scary to me because it's like, here's what I analogize it to. It's like sometimes I'll go on Twitter and there will be some like word or phrase that is completely unrecognizable to me. That's not only trending, but it's like 512,000. And I'm just like, what is going on? And I'll click on it and it's like a K-pop person. I'm just like, I am 500 years old.
Well,
like this is not like, I don't know what this is. And so,
yes, there was a time not that long ago where I literally turned to my wife and I said, I thought Doja Cat was like a cryptocurrency. Like, was that not Doja? Do you know who Doja Cat is?
I do, because Sean Ross Sapp was wearing
the Doja
Cat shirt today on that video. We watched.
Never mention Sean Ross Sapp on our show.
Here we go.
Please don't ever do that. Yeah.
Mark's gonna weigh in and school us on
Mark.
I don't know.
Mark, on our way out, what you got?
No, I agree. I agree on the. I think Bad Bunny is a tougher situation to realize his global popularity, because like, if it wasn't for like a Cardi B record, a lot of hip hop community wouldn't have known Bad. But like Bad Bunny's done songs now with Drake. There's kind of like this hip hop kind of Latino crossover in which Bad Bunny has really kind of tipped the scales in. But I do think now Taylor Swift is one thing. Doja Cat's a little bit more poppy type stuff. I think you were thinking of is it Dogecoin? There was a coin that was like a cat.
Dogecoin, yeah.
But I do think for a lot of folks, the just the global presence of the United States and global presence of kind of Latin music in the United States is where Bad Bunny made his inroads, especially early on. Then it kind of crossed over into some hip hop stuff. But it's not like, Bad Bunny sold out like Yankee Stadium like 3 times in a row.
Amazing.
And if you look at the audience of the crowd, it's mostly like Latinx Americans. Like, I mean, it's not, you don't see a lot of like, larger scale, diversity there. But it's a huge market. He's a big, one of the biggest.
Yes, and in other countries, he like the top stars are playing full soccer stadiums.
Yeah, he's
all that
huge.
Stuff.
He's huge, but it's an interesting dynamic musically for like the U.S. market, because again, if you listen to his album and if you don't speak Spanish, you don't know a word he's saying. You know what I mean? So
right.
It's an interesting thing.
He is a result of the Despacito effect. Can we say that?
Yeah, things of that nature. Yeah.
What a good discussion tonight, guys. We got the draft ahead of us. We'll talk about it all. Great discussion tonight.
Is Migos a person or a group?
Migos is a group.
3 of them.
Yes.
Well, two of them now. One has passed
right.
on. R.I.P. Takeoff.
Yes, Migos, I believe is my cholesterol medication that I take every evening. No, that's not it. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks for all the good discussion, guys. We will get up next week and cover this all. Until then, I'm EJ the Collector. We got the undrafted free agent TG, our producer in the window, who definitely gave us some strong opinions tonight, and we appreciate him coming on. He's always welcome.
I love CM Punk.
Don't stay behind me. You didn't sound like it, but that's okay. It's great, guys. I'm tapping out. That's it. We'll see you guys next Tuesday on WCWF, the Tuesday show. Thanks for joining us.